Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today is our weekly update on terrorism around the world. And we welcome Brother Alexis Bonello to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure, especially our weekly program on terrorism, because as head of Order Militaris Inc., a Montana corporation dedicated to promoting the defense and security of Christians who are victims of terrorism or threatened by terrorism, it's very important to get the word out. People don't realize how much terrorism is going on. The media is suppressing it because the left has basically made an alliance with terrorists and is promoting terrorism openly now, as we said would happen 3 years ago. And so let's get to it. What horrors took place this week?
About Antifa Black Lives Matter terrorists who stalked and killed a Trump supporter in Portland. That the warrant confirms that Antifa Black Lives Matter terrorists stalked and executed Trump supporter.
So the details of it, what did they actually do to stalk this guy? Do you know?
Well, the prayer group that was there with the pro-Trump crowd was just walking the streets of Portland peacefully, and the shooter was behind some those giant trash bins that you see behind the hotels and stuff. While he was just right behind that, was waiting and watching. And when on the video someone yells out, "We got a Trump supporter over here!" He comes out and shoots the guy dead.
Did the charge against him say what kind of weapon he was used?
Yeah, he was brandishing a semi-automatic pistol, which was gotten illegally. He was on a weapons charge as well as a few other charges, but of course the DA in Portland won't charge any of the Antifa members.
So who's is this the federal charge against him?
Yeah, they were. The U.S. Marshals went after him and was trying to get him arrested peacefully and brought in, and so they could talk to him and question him and learn more about the group there in Portland. So maybe go after more of them, but he just had to shoot it out with the U.S. Marshals, and well, they shoot to kill. When you shoot at them.
This is a clear case example that completely shatters the left's propaganda. This guy's the left. He doesn't even observe gun laws. He's on a gun charge, and he's using guns to kill people. You know, I thought it was only people kill. I thought it was guns kill. You know, guns kill people, not people, and therefore guns are evil, and you shouldn't own them. And he owns a gun. I mean, he's in the possession of one at least. Who was this guy, the poor man who was killed? Because we should make the victims' names known. They're the ones that deserve to be remembered. It's just terrible.
Michael, yeah. The killer was okay. Don't want to talk about the killer anymore. I want to talk about there we go. Aaron J. Danielson was the man killed
Hmm.
by the Antifa terrorist.
Do we know anything more about him? He was a part of a prayer group, you say?
Yeah, he was part of the Patriot Prayer Group, and his fellow members said he had a huge heart, would give the shirt off his back to anyone who needed it, was peaceful.
How did they know he was a Trump supporter? Was he wearing a Trump shirt or a Trump hat, or do we know?
Mm, they just, he was there with all the Trump supporters, and so, and they knew about this Patriot Prayer Group, and so when they saw the man walking down the street, they just pointed him out, and he was executed.
So this has the flavor not only of a political crime, but of a crime against religious liberty too.
Yeah.
This guy was killed basically for being a Christian and a white. It's also a
Mm-hmm.
crime of racism. And it shows you that the Marxist takeover America is going to be a spiritual war against the forces of darkness and the forces of light.
Yeah.
Um, poor man, if he was killed for being a Christian, may God have mercy. May God grant him a martyr's crown. Because when you're according to the Catholic faith, if you're killed out of hatred for Jesus Christ, you go straight to heaven. You're a martyr. A real shame. And but at least there was a response from the federal officials, and they hunted this guy down. But you know, if the country was saying that district attorney would be in federal prison for denying this man civil rights, and they treated harshly the state officials in the South during the civil rights movement, why aren't they treating harshly the state officials now during this Marxist revolution? I'd like to see, you know, some equal justice there.
Yeah.
What's the next sad story this week?
Lebanon's military finds another 4 tons of ammonium nitrate near a scene of port explosion.
Was this a weapons cache of Hezbollah?
Let's see here. Uh, looks like the Lebanese military discovered more than 4 tons of ammonium nitrate near Beirut's port on Thursday, a find that's a chilling reminder of the horrific explosion a month ago that killed 191 people. According to the military, Army experts were called in for inspection and found 4.35 tons of the dangerous chemical in 4 containers stored near the port. There were no details on the origin of the chemicals or their owner. The find comes almost exactly a month after nearly 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at Beirut's port for 6 years detonated, wrecking death and destruction.
Mm-hmm. And while the reports are still calling it an explosion of ammonium nitrate, the creator pretty much indicates that something else blew up, and it was in the underneath the building, and not even directly under the building, but under the pavement nearby, and it's under some kind of tunnel. So I'll add my own personal speculation is someone was trying to build a bomb, and you know, dropped the nitroglycerin or something like that, and up it went, or something was stored that was highly explosive, and the things got too hot because of some other nearby fire.
Yeah.
So, what's the next on the list?
Um, Gatestone Institute, the French wish list for Lebanon.
I know, this is foolish now. Let's talk about it.
Does Emmanuel Macron have a plan for helping Lebanon out of its current crisis? Sources close to the French president claims he does. The plan consists of mobilizing international support for a fund to rebuild the shattered port of Beirut and upgrade the country's ramshackle infrastructure. And change it would require a new national consensus that transcends sectarian divides without ignoring them altogether. If you think all this amounts to little more than a wish list, you are right. That the French president should take a special interest in Lebanon is not surprising. Leaving aside the romantic version of a past in which Lebanon is cast as a daughter of France and a bastion of Francophilia, the two countries have many objective interests in common. France is home to an estimated 300,000 Lebanese, many of them with French nationality. The Lebanese political, cultural, and business elites treat France as their principal point of contact with the broader world. A walk in the poshest quarters of Paris takes a visitor by the luxury townhouses and apartments owned by the creme de la creme, a Lebanese establishment for all communities. There is also a great deal of Lebanese money in France, money that can buy political influence when needed. In addition, numerous French businesses, banks in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America use Lebanese contacts as partners and associates or fixers. At the other end of the spectrum, Lebanon is home to over 25,000 French citizens, providing a unique business, cultural, and human link between the two nations. Thus, Macron is right to treat Lebanon as a foreign policy priority worth special attention. However, special attention alone may not provide the strategy needed to help Lebanon negotiate the current dangerous bend in its history. The first defect of the Macron plan, as we understand it, is that it treats what Lebanon faces as a humanitarian disaster, something like a major earthquake or tsunami, or rather man-made tragedy plotted outside and executed by elements in the Lebanese political system. In other words, Lebanon's crisis is caused by geopolitical factors with internal manifestations. Paris policy wonks talk a lot about the need to uproot corruption that has gangrened the ruling establishment. However, corruption has always existed in Lebanese politics, and in the case, could be regarded a way of life rather than aberration. Lebanese corruption comes in two forms. First, it's sectarian nepotism, a system in which the various sects or communities divide public positions and perks. Because a system accepted by all communities, it does not look like corruption from a global point of view. However, it could be seen as corruption within each community when the powerful figures who distribute the posts and the perks discriminate in favor of their own clan within the sect. Dealing with that form of corruption becomes an intra-communal challenge beyond the ken of outsiders. The second form of corruption has been always linked to foreign money, used to buy allegiance and support from or to arm this or that sect. What is different now is that both these two forms of corruption have been turned into instruments for advancing geopolitical goals, with Iran setting the rules. Tehran has tried to rewrite the Lebanese rules of the game in two ways. First, it has recruited and often purchased allies, not to say clients, in all communities. To be sure, Hezbollah remains Tehran's main Trojan horse, but Iran has also a baby Trojan horses in all other communities. This makes the formulation of any broad covenant among the communities, as was the case in the Taif Accords, much more difficult. The second way in which Tehran has changed the rules of the game is to transform Hezbollah into a state within the state, turning the official institutions of Lebanese state into empty shells. Worse still, Hezbollah itself is held on an increasingly tight leash from Tehran. Those who follow the official narrative in Tehran know that the hardcore of the Islamic Republic leadership treats Hezbollah as servants rather than allies, scrutinizing the editorials of the Daily Kayon, expressing the views of the Supreme Guide. The Ayatollah Khomeini will let you know what Hezbollah is ordered to do on any major issue. In other words, Lebanese crisis has a geopolitical aspect that cannot be ignored. When we suggest that policymakers in Paris, the rebuttal is yes, but Iran will always be there. So
It's basically Lebanon has become a colony of Tehran, a colony of Iran. I think that's pretty much it. And this geopolitical analysis adds weight to the speculation that the explosion was not accidental, that it might have been intended by the enemies of Iran, i.e. Israel, because the results of the explosion harm Hezbollah and all of Hezbollah's allies, while at the same time massacring Christians. And so, which isn't a result that would be undesirable to certain radicals in the Israeli government and military. And I, from my contacts in Lebanon, I hear this all over. It's just so divided. Lebanon was created by Masonic France, and it really can't live. That report itself, I'll point out, was Masonic because the Gatestone Institute's calling all the different groups in Israel sects. But Christians are not part of a sect, and we are the true religion. And it's not really quite accurate to call the Shia or Sunni sects. They're branches of Islam. The word sect is more properly used of some small group, maybe like the Druze or the Alawites. Okay, so it's badly used in that article. But just call groups by their names. Hezbollah has gotten a lot of power in Israel because it's a social welfare institution. They spend 300 million, I think, a year just supporting Muslim Shia families with food and work, and which they wouldn't otherwise have. So this is something France could be doing, but France has not done because France doesn't want to support the Christian community. They want to destroy it, basically. Yeah. And get it dominated by the left. And that's why Macron he said the other day, it would be folly to want to solve Lebanon's problems by opposing Hezbollah and Iran. It would be folly. So he's pretty much made it quite clear he wants to do business with Iran, and he wants to give them a free hand in Lebanon. And that puts it in grave doubt where all this money is going to go, the so-called rebuild Beirut. It's probably going to end up in the hands of Hezbollah, funding terrorism in Iran. Because if you don't get rid of all the holes in the bucket where the water leaks out to terrorist organizations, putting water in that bucket means it will eventually all end up in the hands of terrorist organizations. And the government is so opposed to reform that as soon as the explosion took place, they stopped giving any kind of new permissions for charities to be founded that would help restore the city, because they want all the money to go through organizations that they already control. Then they declared a shutdown to prevent foreigners from entering the country, so forcing charities to send money through corrupt banks and institutions. So it's a real, as we say in Italian, pasticcio. It's a complete mess. And it presents lots of problems to any Christian organization wanting to help out in the country. The other area in that report was the idea that all these groups should get along peacefully. Well, that is some kind of psychotic dream in the sense of it's out of touch with reality. Christians, Shia, Sunni have never worked together because two of those groups are obliged religiously to destroy the third of those groups, and the other wants to live in peace with them but has to defend itself. So it's complete. There's a big matrix of Masonic thought in that Gatestone report. I guess they're just trying to write pablum for the international press or something, but otherwise they're very good on that. But when a terrorist organization gets this kind of endemic control of a society, how do you free it? It's not just a matter of, putting troops in the street. You would need a Christian country basically to conquer all of Lebanon and remove all the terrorist groups by force of arms, and it would be a very difficult thing. Macron didn't resist being raped by his own school teacher, who's now his wife. So what would he do to defend a country? This guy is, has not a drop of manliness in him. So Lebanon is in dire straits.
Yeah.
What is Turkey doing to the Hagia Sophia and the Church of the Korah? And now even the church at Bursa.
Turning it back into their mosque to yeah, take it over and turn it back into the mosque, and Erdogan wants to restart the Ottoman Empire, it seems like.
It's unbelievable. I guess he doesn't realize that if people that go to Istanbul go to see the Hagia Sophia and the Church of the Korah, and how he's going to have tourists there. I guess he wants Islamic tourists to come and see it. It's a thing. Some interesting notes here. The Muslim cleric that was asked to lead the Muslim prayers in the Hagia Sophia after it was converted into a mosque just like 2 weeks ago, on the 5th day died of a heart attack. So he was struck down by the hand of God, and that shows you something. The other thing is that a historical note we have to point out here. Hagia Sophia, the Orthodox, there's a good group called the Order of St. Andrew. They're, I think, organized in the United States. They have a Twitter account. We often retweet them. They're highlighting all the persecution going on in the Mideast, especially against the Orthodox, but also in other countries like Africa and around the world. And I recommend you following them on Twitter to get information. We follow them and get information, although they're for Orthodox. So if you're listening to our show and you're Orthodox, you might want to support their organization. They're not quite what we are. They call themselves an order, but they're mostly for legal support. Okay, so not like a security humanitarian organization that we are. Otherwise, I think they do humanitarian works too. They have conferences and things like that. But the Hagia Sophia is not an Orthodox church. I want to clarify this so the Orthodox talk about it. It was built in 532 to 537 by the Roman Catholic Emperor, and it served as the cathedral of the Roman of the Catholic Patriarch of the empire, because the empire was Catholic until 1048 when the schism broke out. And then in 1204, from 1204 to 1276, the Catholics captured Constantinople and ruled it again. It was a Catholic church. And in the last few years of the empire, in 1452 to 1453, it was again a Catholic cathedral. And when it was taken by the Turks in 1453, it was a Catholic cathedral. So for, let's see, how many years is that? That's 500, and that's another almost 100. That's like 600 years of its 600 years of its 900-year history. It was Catholic. Okay, it was Catholic at the beginning, it was Catholic at the end, and it was Catholic most of the time during. So it's we Catholics who should get upset about this being turned into a mosque. And it's good the Greeks are getting upset, and it was for a while used as a Greek church in Schism for Rome, that's true. But the Catholics who celebrated there celebrated the Greek Rite, just the way the Orthodox celebrate. Okay, though they may have changed their rituals since then, I don't know. But they were in communion with Rome in the centuries it existed. So it's a monument to Catholic Christianity, okay? And it's all the great churches of Europe were built by Catholics, even the ones in Protestant countries like England, they were built during the Catholic period. I think only St. Paul's at London was built by the Anglicans, maybe a few other churches. And you can see it's quite a different kind of a building. But after the empire falls, after the fall of Constantinople, the Orthodox, to my knowledge, haven't built any great buildings outside of Russia. Russia is the only Orthodox country I know, and maybe Georgia, where there is still continued to build absolutely beautiful churches, and the Russians build some of the most beautiful of all the churches in the world. They still put their money into that. God bless them, and they give us an example of what we should be doing, not with these modernist monstrosities. But I think they have men as bishops and priests, and this is what we need to restore in the West. So just that little historical note. But the Erdogan is just slowly persecuting the Christians, like in the name of fighting the Kurds in eastern Turkey. He's evacuated 22 Christian villages and shut down numerous churches. I think something like 22,000 Christians had to evacuate their houses, and will they ever be allowed to come back? Then he turned water off to all these Christian towns in northern Syria, and basically in the heat of summer to starve them out. So he's a vicious bigot. The guy, he's just a vicious bigot. There's nothing more to say about it.
Yeah. And we see more COVID fascism coming to Australia, New Zealand, Spain. In Australia, they were protesting against the mask and holding events against it. Well, the Australian police came and arrested them. You covered it in a From Rome post. And New Zealand is setting up concentration camps for those tested positive with the so-called virus.
Mm-hmm. The classical definition of terrorism is a non-state entity, but getting examples now of state-sponsored terrorism against its own citizens, which you can find in the history books of the Soviet Union or the People's Republic of China and countries of that kind. But now we're seeing it in Australia. New Zealand is supposed to be constitutional democratic states. In Spain, other countries where they're viciously beating women, even in Germany, because they're not wearing a mask, or because they're arresting them because they posted on Facebook that people should protest the controls, even though they should wear the mask during the protest. It's absolutely unbelievable. And as a head of security company, point out you should always have a plan to escape your house. If you're living in a state that is no longer ruled by the law, you have no obligation before God to cooperate with the police. So don't let them into your home. Have a way to escape. Have a little special luggage already prepared to get out quickly. And they're always going to come in the morning as soon as you wake up. So get in the habit of waking up early. Have some kind of alarm system, and get a reinforced door that they can't smash down. Okay, so you have time to get out. Okay. But don't post on Facebook. Facebook is a Gestapo organization. Zuckerberg wants all the goys in the world to be put in jail. He's an absolute racist bigot. He's so racist, he didn't even marry a Jew. He married a Chinese woman. That's how racist this guy is. And he reports everyone to the police. I mean, he's right up there with Soros, working with the Nazis to rob Jews of their money and put them in jail and send them to concentration camps. He's right up there. He's an absolute piece of, okay? So don't post on Facebook. But if you're going to post on Facebook, use a VPN, very private network access. And don't use your real name. But that's what Facebook does. As soon as you go on, they want to see your ID. They want to identify you, because it's all about watching you and putting you in jail. You're best not to be on Facebook. Or if you're going to announce something or organize something, do it on a social media network where you can do it anonymously, and then repost it on your Facebook page as a repost, okay? And then, you know, use a little prudence there. These people in Australia that got arrested, they did not use basic prudence. They trusted their government. We've entered a period where if your government is going along with a COVID scam, you cannot trust them, okay? And you're not obliged to trust them if they've shown that they're untrustworthy, okay? And use your rights, because to lawfully use your rights prior to being persecuted is not a crime. Okay, I'm not saying you to use violence against the police or commit any crime against the police, but use your rights beforehand to avoid the conflict and get out. And if you're going to organize a resistance to the scamdemic, I would recommend doing it from the countryside in an unknown location. Do not do it from the city where you can easily be locked up and dragged away. And what will happen to these people, I don't know. That we've seen the videos means that they got out of jail and were allowed to publish the video, because otherwise the video would have been arrested. So we're not yet at the level of control where the people disappear and it's the neighbor who made the video, and if we're seeing the videos made by the people arrested, that means they got out of jail and were able to publish it after the fact. So that's a positive sign. But you can see the absolute coldness of these Australian police, these German policemen. They have no humanity left. They're complete Gestapo mode. They're capable of doing anything because they think they're totally justified in doing it. And it's absolutely outrageous. They're trying to confiscate all electronic devices in the dwelling, even those who don't belong to the guilty person. And that, I don't know Australian law, but that seems completely way out of their jurisdiction. So in a case like this, you don't have to admit you have or do not have, okay? And Catholic teaching is, when you're asked a question by someone who has no right to know the answer, you can remain silent. This principle of Christian ethics is incorporated in US law. You have the right not to incriminate yourself, okay? And not all countries have that concept, but it's part of the natural law and you have it whether your country says you have it or not. Just as if the police came to arrest everyone in the family and they'd say, is this all the members of the family and your little daughter's hiding in the basement? You don't have to say, my little daughter's hiding in the basement, so she gets arrested too, obviously, okay? So you shouldn't lie, because then they could get you for obstructing justice, but then you could always just be quiet and say, I'm not going to respond, or just, I don't know, some vague kind of way of acting. But if you're in a country that's practicing this level of abuse, get out of the cities at least. That's the first thing you should be doing, because that's where there's bigger control. In the countryside, the policemen are more likely to be friending the people. But you have to also create social networks that are going to warn the people in town when these kind of terrorists come to town, even if they're dressed like policemen. Because if the people don't defend themselves, they'll pick off one person after another. And that's how the Soviets did it. That's how the Islamic nations did it. They didn't persecute everyone when they conquered North Africa and the Mideast. It was 20, 30 years later they started going after individuals and picking them off, okay? And that's how these organizations that are into thought control work.
And another, what is called terrorism in Poland, and desecration of the Black Madonna by the LGBT group.
At least in Poland, they have laws against it, but the secularists in Poland are so vicious that they'll take images of the saints or of God himself and mix it in with their ideology just to purposely offend, while parading it around with people that are obscenely dressed.
Mm-hmm.
They're Satanists. Hopefully in Poland they get arrested for it, but who knows? But it's completely satanic. I mean, Catholics don't go on marches showing pictures of gays being hung, okay? So why should these groups go around with pictures of the Blessed Mother dressed as a transvestite? I saw someone on Twitter the other day said Our Lady was a virgin only because she didn't have sex in the natural way. She had sex in unnatural ways. Can you imagine saying things like that? That's how satanic these people are. In the Middle Ages, they would have been burnt alive as witches for saying things like this, yeah. Because a mind that has arrived at complete perfidy of truth says things like that.
Then, in cost-cutting measures, the Navy has decided to ban the Catholic Mass and fire all its chaplain priests.
So do you mean they're going to fire the Catholic chaplains, or they're going to fire also the Satanic and Muslim chaplains?
Just the Catholic ones.
Oh, that will save money, yeah. Mm-hmm. Something is going really whacked out in the U.S. Navy. They can't sail a ship without bumping into something. And then they don't want their men to go inside a chapel, and now they're firing all the chaplains. I don't know what Trump's doing or why he's even letting this go on. I don't see leadership there.
Yeah. There was a report about how the chief of staff, the secretary of the Navy, secretary of the Army, blah, 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 all the big brass are still left wingers and pro China, pro this, and are causing a type of mutiny against Trump because, well, he wanted to go visit that old historic church where all the presidents went to see how it's looking after it got torched by the terrorists that one night in Washington, D.C., and they were all against it.
I don't see leadership there. A leader would bounce these bozos right out of their chairs. I mean, it's not like they're political appointees, just bounce them right out. They're in the military, he's head of the military. Trump, I don't even think ran his companies this way. So why is he running America this way? I don't know. I mean, people voted for him because they thought he'd be a good manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he just hasn't showed it at all. I mean, he gets himself abused for 18 months before he gets rid of these people. He should have gotten rid of them the day after he swore his oath, and he would have had none of these problems. None of these problems.
Yeah. And thinking the guy who's the secretary of the army or whatever you call him, I mean, he was just second, he was like the assistant before he was appointed. And when he was in the temporary assigned position of leading the army, he was, tough, hard nosed, and all of a sudden, once he goes through the process of being confirmed, oh, I'm soft now. I'm a left winger.
Absolute moral pieces of trash. Excuse me for saying it. Okay, let's get on to real persecution. There were more kidnappings in Nigeria.
Yeah. Let me go. More kidnappings in Nigeria. Yeah, terrorists coming back into Somalia. I mean, and the ISIS numbers are up to 10,000.
ISIS in West Africa.
Syria and Iraq.
10,000 now. It was, and who's reporting that? Because last I heard it was only 500.
Oh, I found it last night. Let me get it. Let's see. Man, yeah, it was like only 5,000 we saw last night on last time, and I was looking at someone said, "Oh, Trump stopped ISIS." And I was like, "No, I didn't." And okay, thank you, Twitter, for hiding the tweet.
Okay, well, you're looking at the tweet. ISIS seems to be going on and on and on when it could have easily been wiped out, and I don't know why that was not done. I guess someone wants to keep it going on, but if the U.S. government wanted to wipe ISIS out, all they do have to give me a call, fund us, and I can and definitely assure you we'll wipe ISIS out. We'll recruit 50,000 crusaders, and we'll wipe them off the face of the planet. If you want it wiped out. But if you're just going to play games with these people, what's going on? And
there you go.
What's the report say?
Nearly 2 years after ISIS's defeat, more than 10,000 fighters are still active in Iraq and Syria. This is from August 26, 2020.
And who's doing the report?
Task and Purpose. It's been nearly 2 years since President Donald Trump first declared victory over ISIS, but there are still more than 10,000 of its fighters currently active in Iraq and Syria, according to a UN official. Under Secretary General for Counterterrorism Vladimir Voronkov, told the UN Security Council on Monday that thousands of ISIS fighters are moving freely in small cells between the two countries, and that the militant group is slowly gathering strength amid the novel coronavirus pandemic. There is a continued trend of attacks by individuals inspired online and acting alone or in small groups, which could be fueled by ISIL's opportunistic propaganda efforts during the COVID-19. Voronko reportedly said, noting that the group is likely exploiting the far-reaching disruption and negative social, economic, and political impacts of the pandemic. The UN figure represents a major reduction in the estimated ISIS force strength, down from the 30,000 members that the UN panel of experts claimed was roughly equally distributed between Syria and Iraq back in August 2018. Still, Voronko estimates came just weeks after the head of U.S. Central Command, Marine General Frank McKenzie, warned that militant elements are reconstituting themselves in western Syria, where conditions are as bad or worse than they were in the country leading up to the rise of the terror group in the first place. We should all be concerned about that, McKenzie told reporters on August 12th.
Mm-hmm.
And the activity is increasing, according to this Marine Corps general who's on the ground there.
Mm-hmm. Well, if nothing's done, it's going to increase. Right now, the U.S. does have armed forces in Syria. What are they doing? They're helping the Kurds conquer Syria, or they're defending the Kurds from the Turks. I thought our mission there was anti-terrorism, not to defend Turkey from the Kurds. I mean, that's ridiculous. Why are we spending our money to defend Turkey that is taking over Christian churches and turning them into mosques? It's totally ridiculous. Why are we defending Turkey that's turning water off to Christian towns in Syria? Why are we even defending Turkey that's invaded Syria illegally? Why is it that we spend billions in the Mideast and we don't take any territory, but we defend everyone else that wants to take territory? And why are we even supporting the Kurds that have stolen all northern Iraq from the Christians? I think people need to realize that America is fulfilling the objectives of Freemasonry in the Mideast and is not serving Christ, and is involved in Christian persecution either actively or inactively as a silent collaborator. They're watching the Holocaust go on and doing nothing about it.
I don't know if you can do anything, but I say, sir, if you're watching, Marine General Frank McKenzie, thank you for telling the truth. That you're still over there. And if you need a job after this, contact us.
Yeah. So now, have we finished the list, or a few more things to?
The list is finished, but if you have more, go ahead.
No, I don't have anything more off the top. I'm right yet, but all these reports lead to one conclusion: that Christians will never be defended unless Christians defend Christians. And apart from founding a Christian party in your own country, there has to be a Christian organizations like Order Militaris Inc. that are funded by Christians to defend Christians. We could sit about here and talk at the Blue Days. So I want to thank all our members and our new pledging knight, Dame Chevalier, and all those who make smaller pledges. I encourage you to become a member of our order. It's only $8.50 a month to make a pledge as a member of the order, and you can pledge at higher rates as a herald or a squire or a knight or a baronet or a duke. Because if we had the funds, we could do a lot more to protect Christians. So we are running a Beirut Humanitarian Relief Fund, and I want to thank everyone who's contributed to that. We've raised nearly $15,000 in that. And that will enable us to do some good in Beirut, although it's going to take a few months before legally we'll be able to put it into effect because of all those problems I mentioned earlier in today's program. But buy Lepanto flags from order-militaris.us or any of our merchandise. Invest in our stock. That's what we really need. We can't found companies or really go ahead with any kind of project. We just saw a beautiful piece of property in North Carolina for sale for $5 million. That would be a great training camp. It's all ready to go. We wouldn't have to do anything except move in. And we have stock, or we are authorized by Montana. Our Montana corporations are authorized by the Secretary of State to sell $5 million in stock, and that's just what we need for that property. But until someone buys our stock, what can we do? So if you like Order Militaris Radio TV, make a subscription, a free will subscription, one time or recurring, or buy some of the Merc from the Order Militaris store. These are all ways you can help advance the cause, whether you're of very limited income or whether you're very wealthy. But until we do it, it's not going to get done, okay? So there's no point watching the constant horrors on the television. Every year we let it go, we become, in a certain sense, culpable of all those horrors because we could have done something and we didn't do it. And we've been telling you for 4 years, so to help out. And I want to thank all our early members who were very big in supporting us when it was all in the news. Now it's going to take a bit more virtue because it's not in the news every night. And even in the United States, people are not yet woken up to the fact that revolution is upon them and civil war is headed. We'll see after the day after the election if it is civil war or if Soros was funding Antifa just to get Trump elected. Because if he was, the funding stops after the election. All the rioting will go away. Then you'll know who's really responsible. It wasn't the Democratic Party. They were just playing their part in an act that has a bigger implications about globalism, the vaccine, the fourth industrial revolution, and hoodwinking everyone with someone who appears to be their friend but really isn't. That will be the tell. That will tell the tale.
Yeah. In about 2 hours, we will return with our first ever meeting of the Catholic Party. We'll introduce you to our volunteers. So stay tuned for that later today. Should be interesting and see what they're all thinking about this, and excited, nervous.
And the URL of the blog where you're raising the issue and all the Catholic ways of solving problems, AJ, just to repeat it.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Party for America.wordpress.com.
Okay. So this will be very interesting. I'm glad it just did after a week or so, we're having a meeting in the United States. And even here in Italy, the Catholic Party is getting organized this month. It will be incorporated. So Catholics are really getting interested over here side too. Any Catholic starts hearing about what a real Catholic Party is immediately is like, oh, this is great. This is what we need to do. So this is stuff that AJ and I are doing as private citizens. We are members of Order Militaris Catholicus, but the order is not sponsoring the parties. But as you can see, members of our order have true interest in helping Catholics defend themselves. And this is one way we, as private citizens, can do it. And we encourage you to join us. And it doesn't mean you have to be a member of our order to be a member of the Christian Party of America. But we encourage you, because without a Christian party, we're never going to get real defensive Christians. I mean, it's pretty obvious now. Anyone who can see it.
Yeah.
So thank you, AJ, for having me on for this program, for our weekly discussion. It's sad to say that we're going to probably have to do this again next week, but terrorism seems to be just going on happily, reigning happily.
Yeah. And then tomorrow we'll also have a show on the Christian Party, just continue to talk about policies and platforms, and maybe bring up what we talked about today after talk about today, and bring up the policies that just adding to the website, the blog, and we talk about what was said in the meeting and everything, and So this is Order Militarist Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.